p.m., I am joined by Jimmy and JoAnne Moriarty, and we've started a new program that is exclusive to Patreon and now Subscribestar called Unseen Libya. Jimmy, JoAnne, it's great to see you guys again. How are you today?
Good. Thanks for hosting us. We appreciate it.
Well, I think everyone is very intrigued by the horrendous stories that you've shared with us about your time in Libya. And of course, some of these are stories you've told before and images that you've shared, but they're so disturbing, and they are really the types of things that definitely people like Hillary Clinton don't want the general public to know about. And because of this, the show has been happening on patreon.com/James and JoAnne Moriarty and on patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. And what we've been doing is having this sort of free preview on YouTube and Periscope and Facebook that leads off the show and lets everyone know that they can support Jimmy and JoAnne and they can support Crowdsource the Truth while enjoying this exclusive content and hearing information, frankly, that you're not going to hear anywhere else. Jimmy, JoAnne, what are you guys going to be talking with me about tonight?
We're going to be talking to you about the illegal weapons that were brought into Libya to supply the mercenaries that were there to take over Libya. While we were in Libya in 2011, a big cache of these weapons were caught by the Libyan Coast Guard. The ship was manned by some Libyans and some mercenaries and some rebels. The Libyans call them rats because they're traitors to the country.
Wow.
And when they were captured, they gave up everything. They said it's NATO who's supporting us.
They were trained by the CIA and Mossad in training centers in Libya, in Afghanistan, and that they were promised safe entree into Libya and all the support, air support and everything they needed, you know. And some of them were trained by Mossad, some of them by CIA, some of them by MI6. And they said the French company, they didn't know. But I want y'all to parallel these photos we got. And these were taken with our little camera by a journalist. We were standing on the outskirts of this tent that was temporary tent that was set up to show all these weapons that were brought in. I want you to parallel this with what you're seeing exactly happening in Venezuela right now. The parallel to what the U.S. did in Libya is exactly what they're doing in Venezuela right now. They all ought to be drawn and quartered, because this is not any kind of democracy. Democracy at the point of a gun is not democracy. That's tyranny. And the takeover of a sovereign country by a big guerrilla is not what the American people have bought into.
By subversion, by bringing in mercenaries from other countries and arming them and funding them and training them to take over the country. That is the worst of the worst.
Yeah.
This weapons cache was one of many that the Libyans caught. The
This is the only one we were eyewitnesses to. This is the only one
we were eyewitnesses to. Yeah, you see in this picture, there's a bunch of journalists. There were lots of journalists in Libya. Not any of them reported this.
I turned the camera on them. Not one report of this came out in the mainstream media. But you know, we want the people to understand the reason that our videos are important is because it's raw intelligence. It belongs to us. Nobody was paying our bills. We're paying all our own bills. We recorded this stuff ourselves, or it was given to us by the families of the people that were destroyed. And so this intelligence really proves that Libya was a false flag operation, that it was an invasion of a sovereign state by the U.S., UN, and NATO, and that there was no legitimate purpose for the U.S. to step in and do what they did. There was no authorization from the UN. All the UN authorized was a no-fly zone. No-fly zone does not include bringing in weapons and mercenaries and everything into the country.
Right. So, and that was language that Hillary Clinton used during the debates. It was sort of a lawyerly way to make invading and destroying a country sound nice. Because, of course, if you haven't been invited into the country, if they're not, you know, calling on the United States to protect them, or if you're not declaring this in the United States itself, it's an act of war to declare a no-fly zone in a country that you've just decided can't fly.
Correct. But the U.S. has done this in 80 countries in our lifetime.
The UN is required by their own charter to send 2 fact-finding commissions into a country they decide to take any action in. Libya requested that 3 times, and they were not even answered. This is why during this time when Gaddafi spoke, like he rarely did, he would speak to the people because he wasn't the leader anymore. They had a prime minister and they had 2 houses. When he ever spoke, he said, the UN is an illegitimate organization. They don't even follow their own rules. And this is one of the reasons we were on a fact-finding commission that was, it was a non-profit fact-finding commission, NGO, and I think it was something about Youth for Peace, and there was non-something Youth for Peace. But they, mostly from India and Africa, over 2 billion members. So, you know, we went there, we were the only Americans on that. We don't even know how we got on their list.
We weren't supposed to be there, first of all. And after that, we weren't supposed to get out of there. But, you know, the dreadful fact is that you've had a lot of guests that have told about their cars, computers being zapped, and they ended up in terrible wrecks. That happened to us. Good Lord saved us, and we slid off after doing 360 several times, slid off into a muddy bar ditch, weren't hurt. They planted drugs in our car. They've done all this really to get us in a position, accuse us of something, and then gather all of our information so they could destroy it, because this raw intel is damning to the deep state, to the aggressors, to the bad guys. And we hope everybody appreciates this is absolutely graphic content. It's not easy to watch. But please bear with us, go through the entire series of videos and understand what was taking place then. You can see the same thing taking place right now in Venezuela. And the USA Inc. that is operating as the evil state in Washington, D.C. needs to be stopped, because all these things are happening in our names. And this is not the American way. This is not what we as people expect or will tolerate from our government.
Yeah, and this is the message that we're trying to get out to everybody, which people will be able to hear at 7:30 p.m. Eastern on patreon.com/James and JoAnne Moriarty and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. We need to use these alternate methods of getting this information out, because there's been just sweeping censorship in social media. I don't think anybody really anticipated that. It kind of, you know, the biggest one that everybody started hearing about was Alex Jones, but now we've heard our friend Laura Loomer has been knocked off of PayPal and so many other platforms. There are many people who have been, Carl Benjamin, taken off of Patreon. And one of the things that I've been doing to try to alleviate this is we've started an alternate page on subscribestar.com. And Jimmy and JoAnne, perhaps you can start one of these as well. But in the meantime, people who don't like Patreon can watch exclusive content on subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth. But it's extremely important that people become sponsors of Jimmy and JoAnne's Patreon page by going to patreon.com/James and JoAnne Moriarty. Now, Jimmy, you said that what's going on in Venezuela is the same. How exactly is it the same?
The U.S. lined up weapons, trained mercenaries, armed and trained mercenaries along the Egyptian border of Libya prior to the false flag operation. The largest U.S. embassy in the world is in Tunisia. Tunisia was absolutely infested with weapons and subversives. I'm going to call them mercenaries of the U.S. They were all on the border of Tunisia, also in Algeria.
The CIA is big in Tunisia.
Yeah, CIA is huge in Tunisia. That's what that CIA, the embassy there is a CIA training center, worldwide training center. But we had troops lined up all the way. Well, now in Venezuela, Colombia was taken over by NATO, and immediately the U.S. started depositing troops and military and everything in there. Now along the Venezuelan border, from Colombia, completely lined up with tanks and artillery and weapons and soldiers and everything along the border of Venezuela in Colombia. Colombia has no say in it. This is part of the Southern or AFRICOM, I mean USCOM, whatever it is, military control of South America. And so the U.S. is preparing to invade Venezuela.
Wow.
And, you know, we first of all committed economic warfare in Venezuela for 30 years. We've eliminated their ability to use the money that they earn from their oil and gas sales to feed and develop their country. And then we turn around and blame them. Oh, you're a bad government because you know all this money. Well, the money is being held inside the Federal Reserve System, just like in Libya. The Federal Reserve and European Central Bank stole $500 billion of money from Libya. And this has been going on in Venezuela forever. We took 150 billion of Iranian money 30-something years ago. Have never given that back to them. So we commit economic warfare first. We break the ability of any country to fight back, to rearm themselves, to feed their people. Then we go in and accuse them of being bad guys, and then that's the justification for us to go in there and force our democracy, which means takeover, at gunpoint.
We send in provocateurs to light up the people who are hungry, who are suffering because of the sanctions put on by the United States. And then once we get them lit up, then we send in mercenaries and say, oh, these are all Venezuelan people, and we arm the mercenaries. And then we bring in NATO. Oh, look, they're killing their people in the street. They'll hire some mercenaries to shoot the people in the street. They did it in Libya. The people were from Qatar. They did it in Ukraine to start the war there.
They did it in Las Vegas.
They did it in Las Vegas. Yeah, they do it everywhere. So they'll try to do that. Then they'll say, oh, Venezuela is an illegitimate government. It's killing its people. Now we have to send NATO in to destroy the country.
And I don't know if that many people are aware of this reporting. This was just in August of last year that a U.S. federal judge authorized the seizure of Citgo Petroleum Corp. So what people might not realize is that when they go to Citgo in their local town, they're purchasing gas from a company that is Venezuelan based. And what this seizure back in August did was it resulted in all that money earned by Citgo going to the U.S. government and just being frozen there, not going back to Venezuela. So although I don't support socialism, I think it's a little bit of a overstatement to say, hey, look at Venezuela to see an example of failed socialism. It's maybe a little bit more an example of what can happen when you have a socialist country that's dramatically disrupted by external forces like the CIA, as you're describing. We've just got about 2 more minutes of our preview here, and then we're going to transition over to patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth and patreon.com/James and JoAnne Moriarty. It's very important for people to sponsor Jimmy and JoAnne on their Patreon page. People can also go to LibyanWarTheTruth.com. This is Jimmy and JoAnne's webpage, and you can purchase their DVD there. Can you guys give everyone the details on the special offer you have for Patreon sponsors of patreon.com/James and JoAnne Moriarty, and how they can get the DVD at a discount?
Yes, every Patreon sponsor, send us an email. We'll accept a $15 fee, and we will pay the shipping and handling, which is normally a $5 charge. So it's a $5 discount for any Patreon subscriber, and they'll send us an email, and we'll direct them about how to pay. We want to make sure they get their address. Unfortunately, our website is being beat up so bad that there's not any way that we can remove the shipping and handling, but rather than pay that in advance and us refund, you can make a donation of $15, send us your mailing address. We'll send it to you first class priority mail with tracking.
Yeah, and in just 15 minutes, we'll be live on those channels. We'll be going through some of your personal photographs that you took at essentially what is an ad hoc weapons bazaar right there in a tent in the middle of Libya. And we've got some video from that event. We're going to get into details of how those weapons got there and how you know they were placed there by the United States. Some very obvious indicators. So we'll be back in just 15 minutes. Jimmy, JoAnne, thank you very much. And thanks to all of our generous Patreon sponsors. We'll be live on patreon.com/James and JoAnne Moriarty and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. I also want to welcome the new Crowdsource the Truth sponsors who are enjoying exclusive content on subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth. crowdsource the truth. So stay with us, and we're going to have what is sure to be a very revealing conversation about illegal weapons deliveries to Libya. We'll see everybody on Patreon and Subscribe Star.